Women who are undyingly committed to their partners are a rarity, with only a handful of exceptions. This fact is known to every man. Some may worry about this, while others accept it, and there are those who make every effort to disregard it. I have been married to my wife for nearly 4 decades. We tied the knot when I was only 20 and she was just 19. Throughout our journey, we have experienced a multitude of ups and downs. We've had our fair share of disagreements, but in all that time, I am confident that neither of us has ever betrayed the other. It is truly remarkable to live with a woman of such beauty and never once question her love and loyalty. No matter where fate has led me, she has always been by my side. Together, we have brought 2 wonderful children into this world, Paul, our son, and Katya, our daughter. They have both grown into adults, with families and children of their own. I believed that our future held a tranquil and harmonious old age, surrounded by our beloved grandchildren. As for myself, I am a doctor. I served in the military for 25 years, rising to the rank of colonel in the medical corps. For the past decade, I have been retired, although the term retired may not be entirely accurate. I continue to work at a private clinic to this day. While my hands may not wield the scalpel as often due to the toll of age, I still engage in therapeutic consultations. My wife, Nastya, is employed in an advertising firm, utilizing her training as a designer. To claim we were facing financial difficulties? Nope, not even close. We simply busted our butts. Throughout my service, I ventured to numerous places. I spent nearly a year in Africa, visited Mongolia, and set foot in Vietnam. However, I barely got a glimpse of those countries. A doctor's duties are virtually non-stop, even more so for a military personnel. Then came the troubled areas of the crumbling Union. Yet each time I returned home, I believed my dear wife and children were eagerly anticipating my arrival. Or so I thought. Unfortunately, it was merely wishful thinking. Despite her years, my wife managed to preserve her innate allure. She always took care of herself, enabling her to maintain her youthful physique and a flawless face, devoid of any wrinkles. Whenever we strolled together, folks would mistake her for my young sweetheart. The disparity was striking. A young, blonde beauty and a mature, silver-haired gentleman, daddied with a young companion. Nastya found this contrast immensely amusing, and it certainly boosted my ego. However, as it turned out, I was enjoying myself for no reason at all. It all unfolded one gloomy, rainy evening in November. You ever notice how life's most devastating twists tend to sneak up on us during these dreary autumn nights? It's almost like nature, in its final throes of the season, conspires to pull us down into its own decay. So here it was, the tail end of fall. A biting, almost winter-like wind gusted, driving the cold, biting raindrops against my window, morphing them into streams cascading down the glass. There I was, perched at the kitchen table, completely absorbed in my stack of papers, hunting for my medical book. Monday loomed with an appointment at the clinic, and I desperately needed to locate my vaccination records. Nastya was nowhere to be found. She'd ventured into the city earlier in the day, planning to stock up on groceries and whip up a Sunday dinner for us. Hours ticked by as I sifted through a trove of old documents, some so ancient they had yellowed with age. And then, out of nowhere, I stumbled upon something that stopped me in my tracks. An excerpt from my wife's medical records. It was timed just as I found myself on an extended business trip, having been away from home for nearly a year. 4 years had passed since my daughter was born, and this was concerning Nastya's pregnancy and the subsequent premature arrival of her baby. There were results from tests, ultrasound findings, and it emerged that Nastya had given birth to a 6-month-old infant much earlier than expected. Unfortunately, after 3 days, the little one passed away. Following that, we received the results of her and the baby's tests, blood type, R factor, and so forth. The baby's blood type turned out to be R negative and type 3. At that moment, it felt as if a heavy cupboard had crashed down on me. There was absolutely no chance I could be the father of that child. Nastya and I have blood type O and are R positive. In other words, a child of ours couldn't possibly possess those blood characteristics. Only type O and R positive would be feasible. Ultimately, the child could not belong to me at all, since I was simply out of the country during that time. For an extended period, I found myself staring blankly at the report, unable to piece together my jumbled thoughts. Nastya has been unfaithful. While I was away, she somehow got pregnant and almost delivered a baby. But by whom? Just half an hour ago, I was completely certain that my family was rock solid. My wife loved me deeply, and our future was bright and unperturbed. But now, all that lay in ruins behind me. After taking a moment to compose myself, I collected the scattered certificates and discreetly stowed away the piece of evidence I had stumbled upon. The most crucial thing now was to maintain my composure. I couldn't let myself get too worked up. The reality of Nastya's betrayal was well documented. Although a part of me wanted to confront her the instant she returned, I knew I had to unravel this mystery first. Our children, that was undeniable. They were born 9 years apart, and both Pavel and Katya shared my blood type, the second blood type. It was evident that they were my offspring. They even bore a striking resemblance to me when I was young, as much as children can truly resemble their father. Yet this knowledge failed to bring me any solace. I just couldn't wrap my head around why she treated me that way. We tied the knot because of love, after all. I had pursued her diligently for nearly a year. Other women simply faded into the background for me, even though I was charming enough to catch their eye and wasn't lacking in admirers. Yet in my heart, there was only one woman, my Nastya. Throughout our journey together, I did my utmost to shower my wife with affection and consideration. At times, it honestly felt like my existence revolved solely around her. She meant the world to me, and then some. And now, look at this mess. My heart was filled with sorrow. I stepped out onto the balcony, craving a gulp of fresh air. As my gaze descended, I witnessed, in the gentle glow of a faintly flickering lamppost, a vehicle gliding to a stop just outside our pathway. After a moment, my beloved wife emerged from the car, accompanied by a gentleman. With nimble movements, he retrieved several packages from the backseat. Nastya hastily planted a kiss upon his cheek, procured the bags, and made her way towards the driveway. Meanwhile, the man settled comfortably into the driver's spot, and the car leisurely departed from our premises. The farther it retreated, the more elated I could feel myself becoming. The lock on the front door clicked. "Yura, you here?" My wife's voice rang out unexpectedly, and I knew immediately that I couldn't hold back any longer. It was time to get some answers. I stopped by Marinka's to chat about the big questions in life, Nastya said, devoid of any feelings. And I ended up staying longer than planned. I'll make something quick now. "Why are you all flustered?" She pecked me on the cheek, the scent of alcohol still fresh on her breath. "Oh, don't make that face. Marinka and I just had a bit of champagne." She wiped the lipstick smear from my cheek. "So she drove you home." I did my utmost to keep my tone even. Nastya cast an unfamiliar glance in my direction, clearly at a loss for words. "Yura, give it a rest." I took a cab, or, well, a friend gave me a lift. She stammered, desperately searching for a convincing explanation. What's the issue? It was trivial, really, but such intimacy must mean he's more than just a friend. given you kissed him farewell. My pulse raced so fiercely, I was convinced our neighbors might hear the thumps. To distract myself and regain some semblance of composure, I rose and fetched a sealed bottle of whiskey from the cupboard. Nastya looked at me with wide, apprehensive eyes. How should I know? How should I know? I was out on the balcony and caught you parting ways with your driver. It required considerable effort to remain composed and hold back my desire to yell. Is a kiss now a standard goodbye? Yura. What now, Yura? I served myself a generous glass of whiskey. Take a seat, we need to discuss a few things. I dragged a stool from beneath the table and retrieved a troubling piece of paper from my briefcase. Nastya, what's all this about? I laid the document before my wife, seeking explanations. She cautiously flipped through a couple of pages, only to abruptly snatch her hand back. Where did this come from? Nastya queried, her eyes welling up with tears. Did you read it? Nastya, who got you knocked up? What went down? I inquired as I reached for a glass, unable to bring myself to take a sip. There was a moment of silence before she spoke in a surprisingly composed tone. It was inevitable, and perhaps it's even a blessing that it occurred now. In a composed yet quiet tone, she shared that during my prolonged absence, a detail she stressed, she had encountered a young man who swept her off her feet. This young man was a whole 11 years her junior. It seemed like a fixation. She simply couldn't resist. Initially, she would hurriedly meet him for dates, but soon she entrusted our kids to her mother and allowed him to move into our flat. They began living as if they were married. In the throes of this ethereal love, she ended up expecting a child, and he popped the question. To her, a woman already wed, and the mother of our 2 kids. Enveloped in her romantic haze, she even harbored a secret hope that I wouldn't return, and then everything would just fall into place. They tie the knot and live their lives together. But fate had other plans. The baby arrived prematurely and succumbed 3 days after birth. At this point, she broke down in tears. It dawned on me that her emotional downturn overshadowed everything, disregarding the well-being of our other children. After the child passed away, their relationship cooled significantly, and as she put it, they began to drift apart. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, a young lady entered the scene and her partner eventually left, chasing after new escapades. Troubled for a spell, Nastya gathered the kids and waited for my return. When I did come back, she welcomed me as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. In the ensuing years, she meticulously portrayed the part of a loving, devoted wife. I was flabbergasted. Honestly, I was rendered speechless, and my mind went completely blank. I just stared at the wall, utterly unable to form a single coherent thought. I'm flabbergasted, absolutely stupefied. And that's not even the half of it. Half a year ago, out of nowhere, her close confidant made an appearance in our little corner of the world. Their passion rekindled with a fiery intensity. As it turns out, she had been harboring feelings for him all these years. And like a ripe plum falling into a pile of manure, my wife surrendered herself to his embrace. In short, they've been together ever since, and now she wants to embark on a new life, unfortunately without me in the picture. She'd been by my side for 4 decades, dedicating her prime years to me. And now that our kids were all grown up, she was eager to begin anew with the man she truly loved. While she said all this, she was painfully aware that every word was tearing me apart. At that moment, she seemed like a merciless executioner just carrying out their duty. Nothing personal, you know. It's love. These things happen. And there you have it. We can take a breath and grab a drink. What transpired afterward? I refilled my glass with whiskey once more and consumed it in a single gulp. Quite an intriguing beverage, I must say. It fails to bring me down in any way. Perhaps I am simply fatigued. I took hold of the bottle and examined it under the light. No, the hue is just right. A light brown shade, akin to the aged Irish whiskey it ought to be. Ah, I've got it. I shall simply pour myself another round. But what am I truly engaging in? Maybe one doesn't pour it at all, but rather drinks it directly from the bottle's neck. You may have noticed that a bottle of fine whiskey has a broad and comfortable neck, reminiscent of a decanter. Incredibly convenient, I must say. You hardly even require a glass. Nastya sat across from me, maintaining silence. It even started to concern me. Perhaps something had occurred, or perchance there was a shortage of kerosene. She spoke so eloquently, so aptly. A commendable young lady, indeed. She has been deceiving me for years. If it weren't for stumbling upon the transcript, I likely would have remained oblivious. Oh, what a cunning and deceitful woman she truly is. And those words she uttered, it happens. Of course it happens. It's not a dilemma. It occurs, plain and simple. I should close the window. It's rather chilly. I rose from my chair, nudged the stool with my foot, and ventured into the bedroom. Muting my words, I swiftly attired myself, hastily gathering a few belongings into my bag. Wordlessly, without a parting remark, I embarked towards the exit. Yura. Her voice hung in the air, only half posed as a question. Why must you venture out in the dead of night? I glanced towards her, her somber outline contrasting against the kitchen threshold. Is there nothing you wish to share? I wondered if she might break into tearful sobs, or perchance it was just my fanciful mind. The poor girl, so fraught with anxiety. I shrugged my shoulders, unlatched the door, and gingerly stepped out, taking care not to grace the frame with my protruding horns. Outside, autumn awaited my presence. Inhaling the moist air, I slung my bag onto my shoulder and strolled leisurely down the sidewalk, blanketed in golden foliage. A craving for a cigarette tugged at me, provoking me to pat my pockets, just in case. Alas, I found nothing, as it had been 2 decades since I bid farewell to smoking at Nastya's behest. She had been deeply concerned for my well-being and sought to secure my longevity. Nightfall had settled in, the city gradually succumbing to a restless slumber. The houses displayed dimly lit windows, while the streets remained nearly deserted, their sole illumination emanating from the streetlights. Just then, my phone chimed, Nastya's name gracing the screen. Troubled by her thoughts for her beloved husband, I promptly silenced the device and powered it down. A sudden wave of sorrow washed over me, prompting me to clamp my coat collar between my teeth, stifling any inclination to unleash a despairing howl. At that moment, a full understanding of the situation enveloped me. I even shook my head, as if hoping to dispel the tormenting thoughts that had engulfed my being. What should I do? Where should I go? The simplest option would be to confidently close the door behind me and leave. But where would I go? To the children. They already have plenty of issues to deal with. I've never had an affair, probably for no reason at all. Only for work, like being on duty. I'll stay the night, and tomorrow I'll come to a definitive conclusion. Casual stroll by the somber houses, taking care not to slip on the dampened autumn leaves. Hey buddy, got a smoke? I abruptly turned around and found myself engulfed in darkness. Nastya delicately withdrew her lover's hand from her bosom and quietly extracted herself from the bed. It was an unprecedented occurrence for them to express their love without the ever-present fear of exposure. Adorning herself in a robe, the woman advanced towards the kitchen. There on the table sat an incomplete whiskey bottle. He never tidies up after himself, it seems, she mused, only to suddenly realize that her thoughts were continuously consumed by her spouse. Yura, where has he gone? He isn't answering his phone. I am unaware of what has transpired. Nastya glanced out of the window. Autumn enveloped the night, accompanied by the pitter-patter of raindrops. Perplexingly, her heart bore an inexplicable ache. Whereas, the more benevolence we bestow upon our cherished woman, the more fervently she begins to hold us in contempt and seeks solace elsewhere. The intense light assaulted my vision like a raid team descending on a thug's hideout. "At last!" exclaimed a male voice next to me. Turning my head was an effort. "Welcome back, Yuri Ivanovich." My supervisor beamed, patting my hand warmly. What happened to me? My words stumbled as I spoke. "Ah, you're in our hospital. You arrived in the ER tonight with a head wound. Thankfully, your ID was with you, and they contacted us. We brought you in and performed surgery immediately. Everything went well, and you've made it back to us. We've informed your family. Your son is already on his way here, and the detective mentioned he'd stop by this afternoon. Do I possess a spouse? Recent occurrences have once again caused my heart to constrict. A partner in matrimony. A partner I do not possess." The entranceway into the chamber emitted a creaking sound. "Father, greetings. How fare you?" My offspring Pavel planted a kiss upon my cheek. You instilled anxiety within us. With caution, he placed a bag onto the nightstand. It contains produce and liquid sustenance. We are currently restricted from consuming anything else. Pavel adjusted the covers on my bed. Mother could not yet arrive, as she had pressing business matters to attend to. There is no necessity for her presence. Very well, very well. Merely abstain from worrying. I'm fairly certain Pasha was clued in about our split. Makes you wonder what Nastya might have spilled to him. But really, what do ex-wives spill in these scenarios? Probably went on about how I didn't love her enough, didn't cherish her enough, extinguished her spirit. Cut the melodrama. As Chingachgook the big snake famously stated, the past is irrelevant. A fortnight later, I checked out of the hospital. Nastya dropped by a couple of times, yet I opted not to meet her. The past is irrelevant, after all. Initially, I settled into a modest flat not too distant from the medical center where I was employed, and started adjusting to the bachelor lifestyle. The split with my wife stirred mixed feelings. On one side, undeniably, the sting of her betrayal gnawed at me, while on the flip side, it opened up vague yet intriguing possibilities. One thing stood crystal clear. I was putting a firm halt on forging any new romantic ties. The jolt from that last relationship was a stern vaccination against future entanglements. Then came a divorce, leaving me bereft not only of a spouse, but also of my own sanctuary. The children remained impartial, yet their leanings towards their mother were evident. In order to numb the anguish, I threw myself into my work. Remarkably, I managed to dodge the pitfall of drowning my sorrows in alcohol, a fate that often befalls forsaken husbands. Approximately 2 months later, I received a call from an old comrade who requested an encounter. "Yura, do you recall lending me a substantial sum several years ago?" He initiated the conversation. I recalled that. 3 years ago, Sergei had taken a considerable loan from me. He was facing severe challenges with his business and had no one else to seek assistance from. Having recently sold my mother's apartment, I possessed the funds he needed. When I handed over the cash to my friend, I consciously chose not to set a deadline for repayment, understanding that expecting Sergei to return the money immediately was simply unrealistic. Sergei managed to get his life in order. However, he didn't seem to rush to settle his debt. I came to realize that if I brought up the topic of repayment, I risked losing our friendship. My dad used to say, when lending money to a friend, act as if you're giving it away. If you hold this person in high regard, just let the debt slide. When the right moment arrives, he'll pay you back if he's able. Thanks for bailing me out back then. I'm back on my feet now, and my venture is thriving. Sergei added, I put your money into my business, and today it's yielding great returns. He gave me a bank card. This is what I owe you with interest. It's 5 times the amount you lent me the other day. Man, that cash sure came through when I needed it. I splurged on a cozy little cottage on the outskirts of town and even got myself a car. Keeping up with the chores was too much though, so I brought on an assistant. She was nearly 15 years my junior. Quite a young lady with a history already written. She had spent almost 2 decades with her ex-husband. They never had kids because she couldn't conceive, and eventually he left her for someone else. A neighbor filled me in on all that drama. Natasha herself, she didn't really bring it up. As for me, I had no intentions beyond hiring her for help around the place. She was just a helper, plain and simple. It went on like that for nearly half a year. One day, while chopping wood, I suddenly felt nauseous. Overwhelmed by a splitting headache, I blacked out. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital bed with Natasha at my side. Turns out she was the one who dialed for an ambulance. When the medics arrived, she was cradling my head in her lap. Despite everything, I was okay. You see, head injuries linger and take their own sweet time to heal. After that ordeal, my perspective on Natasha shifted. I began to truly notice her beauty for the first time. Our bond deepened into something more intimate, and eventually I popped the question. Come autumn, we tied the knot. Knowing that we couldn't have kids made our love even more carefree. Yet about 3 months into our marriage, Natasha began ailing. Nausea, headaches, the whole 9 yards. Without hesitation, I rushed her to my clinic. Imagine our astonishment when they revealed she had been pregnant for almost 8 weeks. I vividly remember Natasha turning to me, her eyes wide with shock. Whatever you say, I'm keeping the baby. I clutched her close and kissed her precious eyes. It was in that moment that a profound realization dawned upon me. Whenever fate shuts one door, another swings open. Life, as it turns out, was beginning to look up. Then out of the blue, and just on the cusp of New Year's Eve, Nastya rang me up. We need to meet, she pleaded, her voice dripping with desperation. I've reserved a table at a restaurant. Please be there by 7 p.m. I'm begging you. Nastya faced me, her entire demeanor radiating repentance and sorrow. Yura, I'm sorry. There was not a day I didn't think of you. Her eyes began to well up with tears. I committed a grave error. I was unfaithful to you, to our family, to our children. She went on talking while I quietly observed the woman I had once adored without reservation. A woman I would have willingly sacrificed my life for. The same woman who had cold-heartedly deceived me not once, but twice. The woman who had fed me lies for nearly 2 decades. The woman who had abruptly pushed me out of her life to be with another man. And yet, here she was, abruptly awakened, attempting to reclaim what we had. Nastya couldn't stop telling me that her time away from me had opened her eyes to just how much she adored me. Now she finally understood that I was the one true man in her life. Strangely, she brought to mind a siren from Greek legends, her words lingering, lulling me into a dream where I was the sole possessor of her heart. I'm sorry, she chanted, repeating the phrase like a spell. As I stared at her brightly painted lips, which showered me with such sweet nothings, I couldn't help but imagine those same lips kissing and caressing her lover. Did she really expect me to buy her story? That she was lost and didn't know what she wanted? Was I supposed to believe that this woman, who betrayed me, had a child with another man, abandoned me, and spent all her free moments with someone else, came back because she loved only me? When the right moment came, she effortlessly found a pretext for her stinginess and abandoned me without a second's doubt. Several times she indulged in the intimate delights with her paramour in the comfort of his bed and was calculatingly scheming the perfect time to deliver the ultimate betrayal. Now here she stood, presenting me the only valuable thing she had left, a thing already tarnished by her lover's touch. She had come to the harsh realization that she was merely his entertainment, only significant while her pockets were lined with cash. With him, a future was unattainable, leaving her without any financial support. Grasping these truths, she slithered back to me, desperate to reclaim what she had squandered. Good heavens, does she perceive me as so naive to swallow her fabrications whole? Throughout her regret-filled soliloquy, I remained silent, bereft of words for her. There was simply nothing left to say. You know what? I didn't take any pleasure in seeing her suffer, didn't revel in it at all. Honestly, I felt a pang of compassion for her, that human kind of sympathy. 4 decades together, that's no small feat. Yet it was clear our paths were parting. Just then, my phone interrupted the silence. It was Natasha on the line, inquiring where she could pick me up. I relayed the address and hung up. Is she the one? Nastya's voice was a whisper, her eyes brimming with tears as she peered into mine. Yes, I affirmed. And how long have you two been an item? Almost 1.5 years now. Life's strange, isn't it? Standing up, I reached for my coat. Farewell, Nastya. I hope you find happiness. As I exited the restaurant, I couldn't resist glancing back. Nastya stood there, her hands tightly clasped to her chest, her gaze fixed upon me through the window adorned with joyful decorations. Commotion filled the surroundings as people hurriedly went about their business. Life carried on relentlessly. Across the street, a shamelessly vibrant Coca-Cola advertisement blared out with flashing lights. Drink and experience pure bliss. Yeah, right, like that would be true. I made my way to the car and inserted the key into the ignition, prompting the engine to hum with tranquility. With a flick of the turn signal, I joined the stream of perpetually rushed vehicles, blending seamlessly into the swarm of cars on the move.